listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the College Football Week 1 betting odds preview for Thursday, August 29th, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
At long last, football has returned. College football is going to get up and running. We're going to finally see these teams after reading. We had two great games last weekend, kind of wet everybody's whistle, but we are officially ready to rock and roll with the start of a college football season. Brian Blessing in Las Vegas, thrilled to be with you. Bruce Marshall, our good friend from the Gold Sheet, is alongside. In fact, Bruce and I were part of a panel at Sunset Station earlier this week with our kickoff to football seminar. And you could just sense the anticipation from the players, Bruce. They're betting baseball, and they're getting through the summer months, and football is here. And the reaction already with those two great games last week, both of them, Florida and the game with Miami, and then the Arizona-Hawaii game, both of them coming down to the final play of the game. Really electric stuff as both games, high handle, standalone, lived up to a lot of hype.
Yeah, and we get a full week here. We're both old enough to remember when the season would start in mid to late September. Heck, Brian, we were both alive when teams would start playing in October. So this stuff in late August is pretty good for those of us who like to watch these games. And, yeah, we got a pretty full slate for this week.
All right. Well, let's not waste any time. We got a lot of games we want to get to, kind of dissect them. And we'll focus on the marquee games here on Thursday and Saturday for the most part. But let's come right out of the gate with UCLA and Cincinnati, Bruce. We saw an opener of 4.5. A consensus now is Cincinnati a 2.5-point favorite, 57.5. And I would just ask you this. We watched Arizona in that game with Hawaii, and now we're going to get UCLA Cincinnati. There's another game coming up on the weekend. A bad Kent State team's going to play Arizona State. And you get these crossover non-conference games. Can you form opinions on conferences based on early games? Are there tipping points?
Yeah, I think so, especially if they follow a pattern from previously. Now, you're going to get wins and losses, and it may not suggest a trend, but if it matches some of the perceptions you have about a team or conference, and the further each step you remove, you have to expand your the definition and the scope, and it gets a little less meaningful, but not always. I mean, we've seen the Pac-12 struggle in bowl games for years, and so if you see the results continuing in that pattern, then keep an eye on it. But I mean, you're always going to see there could always be a few more winners than losers in any sample of games. But if you have an idea what you're looking for and it matches performance from the past, then yeah, it might be more significant.
All right, how about this game specifically? Luke Fickell with Cincinnati. He's got a lot of experience on both sides of the ball, but now he's dealing with the weight of expectations, right?
Yeah, they were a 14-point underdog in this game last year at the Rose Bowl that the Bearcats won in the opener. Again, they trailed in the fourth quarter, then they kind of took charge. 26-17 kind of set the tone for both of these teams last year. But that was last year, like you say, Brian. This is this year. And now Cincinnati's favored in this game, not by much. But the consensus opinion is that UCLA should probably be better this year. We saw some indications of the Bruins starting to get a feel for what Chip Kelly wanted to do down the stretch last season. It wasn't necessarily reflected in more wins, but much more competitive efforts. The offense started to hum a little bit more. They weren't running this offense at the sort of tempo that Chip would prefer a year ago. They're going to do more of that this season with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the sophomore quarterback, with a season or a half season or so effectively under his belt. But Cincinnati is pretty tough, and the defense is the top 10 defense last year. Their quarterback Ritter returns, Warren, their top running back. And wide divergence of opinion on UCLA from people who follow the Pac-12. In this case, I think we want to watch and see what we're getting with UCLA. Until then, though, we'll trust last year's the last time we saw these teams. 31-23 Cincinnati. That's our score forecast for this one at Nippert.
I don't want to go too long on this one game, but I would just say this. Upcoming games for UCLA, they host San Diego State, then they host Oklahoma, then they dive in to conference play. How closely do you watch this game then? Because we're accustomed to what Chip Kelly's offenses usually are. It seems, at least from what we're hearing, it would be more of a run-based, really balanced kind of attack. Is that something you watch very closely here to apply to future games?
Yes, and because it certainly was the case last year, and we got an indication UCLA wasn't quite ready at this point a year ago, so I think they'll be a little bit more ready in Chip's second year. But watch the tempo they play at, though, because that's the key with all the Chip. I mean, his Oregon teams are ground-based, but they ran at a very fast clip, and they weren't playing tempo really last year. He'd like to do more of that, so that's what you want to watch in this game tonight.
All right, sir. This is a very, very intriguing game. Utah and BYU. And approaching kickoff now, we're seeing some money come in on Utah. But it's Utah and BYU. This is one of these regional rivalries. And to play it in the opener is a real, confounding piece of the Rubik's Cube here. Both teams, extra time to prepare. Utah, real opportunity to win the Pac-12. But this is one of these things where it could be a backyard brawl. And the total, Bruce, has plummeted to 48. Everybody's expected a physical, low-scoring game. And we're seeing it's funny. I mean, you're seeing this money on Utah and those low-scoring games. You kind of look at the dog, but the money's coming in on the favorite.
Yes, and it's interesting here, the scheduling dynamics. Now, they're normally going to play this game in about mid-September. This is the new scheduling with these teams. These last 2 years, this year and last year, though, they had to fit some different things in. And last year, they played this game right at the end, which they hadn't been doing for a long time since these teams were back way in the Mountain West days. They were both in the Mountain West. And this year, here we got the opener. That schedule spot last year, I thought, worked very much in BYU's favor. Utah had a season long of Pac-12 wars, had already clinched the South and was looking ahead to the championship game the following week in the conference. Well, BYU basically had a month to aim at that game and had a 27-7 lead in the third quarter before letting that thing slip away. So they think they should have won that game last year. I think they caught Utah kind of flat. Kyle Whittingham is a BYU guy. It's an important game for him. They have beaten BYU 8 in a row straight up in this series, which was interrupted for a couple of years, but now it's back as it should be. Zach Wilson is a lively quarterback for BYU. They played better down the stretch with him, including a big bowl win last year. But Utah, I think, could have a special year. All those defensive linemen who could have gone to the NFL stuck around for one more year like Clemson's guys did last year. Huntley, the quarterback, was hurt down the stretch last season. He's back. Moss, the running back, did not go to the NFL like he could have. This looks like a special year for Utah. 30-19, Utah is our score forecast. But that total, like you said, that was originally picking this thing under, but now that's right about on the total. So it's more a vote for Utah for us tonight.
Hey, speaking of Utah, let's do a couple of Friday night games. Utah State, Wake Forest. Wake Forest, 3.5, 4-point favorites. The total on the game is 60. I think it's pretty interesting to see what Utah State's going to bring to the table here. Gary Anderson is the new head coach, but he'd been there before and found out the pastures aren't always greener on the other side of the fence. But he's got a quarterback to work with that could make this game intriguing.
Yeah, Jordan Love he's probably the best quarterback in the Mountain West, one of the best west of the Mississippi maybe. And, he led an offense that scored 47 points per game last year. And that's what helped Matt Wells get hired down at the Texas Tech. But almost everybody except Love has graduated from last year, so they are fitting some new pieces in, but at least they've got the quarterback there. You mentioned Anderson, Back to the Future here, last time here in 2012. Now, Wells, as his offensive coordinator, got promoted, and the schemes and the terminology and everything were pretty much the same, which they remain for Anderson returning here 7 years later, though the staff is mostly new. Wells took most of his guys down to Lubbock with him. Last year would have jumped on Utah State in this spot. I'm a little leery here in this one Friday. Wake Forest does not chop liver. Newman, their quarterback, they went to him down the stretch last year. He's very versatile. Carney is a physical back. Dave Clawson, very underrated head coach. And at this price, we think they're actually might not be a bad value on Wake Forest here, 34-26. I think this team is going to be pretty good this year, and I'd expect Utah State to slip a little bit. How much we'll start to find out Friday night.
Betmaker, let's make some money tonight.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. Colorado State, Colorado, this is a regional rivalry game with Colorado a 13.5 point favorite, which I think speaks volumes to how down Colorado State is. But it's the total, Bruce, where we saw a suggested opener of 64.5. It's down to 55.5. And I'm not buying this move to the under. I think you're getting an up-tempo offense they're going to employ with Montez, and he's capable of doing that. I got a funny feeling this is a high-scoring game, but all the money's on the under.
Yeah, it could be. Colorado went through these guys like a hot knife through butter last year. Now, they were playing a fast tempo last year at the start. They gained almost 600 yards in this game. This was the real breakout game for Laviska Shenault, their wide receiver, caught 211 yards worth of passes, and CSU was pretty helpless. Now, Colorado eventually last year started to unravel pretty much after Shenault got injured, and he wasn't the same player the second half of the season. Montez, the quarterback, is still there. It's a new coach. Mel Tucker comes in from Georgia, where he was the defensive coordinator at one point in the past, had been an interim head coach in the NFL with the Jags in 2011. The jury is still very much out on this hire for me, but the key here is I don't see any indication CSU is going to be much better. They have really tailed off since the middle of 2017. They're only 5-14 versus the number since. They fell off to 3-9 a year ago, one of the worst defenses in the country, and most of those guys are back. For Mike Lovell, who made really no changes on his defensive staff, I think this is a situation that's going to get pretty bad this season at Fort Collins, and we'll take Colorado here, 38-20. Colorado, I think, goes over the total, and I think the Buffs handle the spread rather handily on Friday.
All right, one of the games on the weekend, and we'll dive into a bunch of them here, but I'm really looking forward to this game. I love when the smaller programs get their opportunity at a conference, and specifically, I'm looking at this Toledo game with Kentucky, and Kentucky's a 12-point favorite. I think the total is ridiculously low here. It's at 62. This Toledo team can put up video game numbers, and they come out of the gate. Last year, they flew out of the gate. Now, last year. Now, Kentucky has got some work to do. But I think it's one of these things, Bruce, that just by default, an SEC team, big, strong guys, they're going to have their moments, even while they're sorting things offensively against the smaller conference. They've got to replace Benny Snell. But I think Terry Wilson can get the job done. I love points in this game.
Well, it could be, yeah, and I love the Toledo side too. But before saying that, note the job Mark Stoops has done at Kentucky and what they did last year, 10-3. I mean, check out how many times Kentucky's won 10 games in the past. Last time, and the only time in our lifetimes, Brian, was 1977 with Frank Kersey, and they were on probation then. And Stoops, a few years ago at SEC Media Days, I asked him about where he recruits outside of his state there, and he said, we go into Ohio some, and that's about it, because some kids up there might want to come down and play in the SEC. But if you look at their roster now, they have spread that net a lot wider. They got kids from the Tidewater, they got kids from Carolina. He has built this program up nicely, and they're not going to fall off the map. Having said that, though, I'm not going to lay the 12 points here. No way. Even as good as Kentucky was last year, remember Josh Allen, a first-round linebacker, too, big defensive star, and he's with the Jaguars now, and Benny Snell, like you mentioned, but they have failed to cover their last 9 as home chalk. They've also failed to cover their last 10 at home against non-SEC teams coming in. I mean, they only have so many bullets they can fire each year at Kentucky. They usually save them for the SEC. Toledo's potent, like you said, both quarterbacks, Godogny and Peters, back from a year ago when they scored 50 or more points 6 times. So, we could see this thing going over. Updated score forecast, 34-30 Kentucky. I think they might be able to pull this one out, but, points look really loom large here with a dangerous MAC underdog, especially considering Kentucky's historic problems laying this sort of price at home.
Well, I'll throw one at you, and normally you wouldn't be batting an eye about a 20-point favorite, but Mississippi State, 20-point favorite at Louisiana Lafayette. The total on the game is 60. This is one of these games, and I think in week one, I've got some opinions, I've got some games, but I think for the most part, I want the old eyeball test cranking, and in-play wagering, halftime wagering is a real way to go, I believe, early in the season until we actually can confirm what we believe. So in that vein, I want to see both of these teams, specifically Louisiana Lafayette at home. But both of these teams, Bruce, had exceptional recruiting classes. So let's see what some of these new faces are going to bring to the table here. I'm wondering if, Mississippi State better not be taking these guys lightly.
Yeah, they better not. Now, they're playing this game in New Orleans at the Superdome, but there'll be a lot of fans from Lafayette there, and so they flood that place whenever the Raging Cajuns play in the New Orleans Bowl. So it'll split the crowd there pretty good, but they're familiar with this site. Yeah, you mentioned some of the newcomers, including transfers, and that's what Mississippi State's got at quarterback. Tommy Stevens came in after spring practice from Penn State. Now he is familiar with Joe Moorhead, obviously, from their days together at Penn State. So there's thought down there that Stevens actually might fit better with what Moorhead wants to do than Nick Fitzgerald did last year. He never seemed totally comfortable in the Moorhead offense. Moorhead was able to bully the teams he could last year, including these guys, 56-10. But Ulala improved a lot last season, improved a lot for Billy Napier in his first year. They got back to a bowl game. They've got all their runners back, a couple of 1,000-yard rushers in Regas and Mitchell, and Levi Lewis turned into a pretty accurate quarterback late last season. They're pretty encouraged about him. I think this is too many points. The Raging Cajuns might not be that bad. 35-17 our score forecast. Yeah, we'll see what goes on with in-game. Might not be a bad idea. It's not a bad idea ever, but certainly in this one we'll find out more early on. But I think over 3 TDs is asking a little bit much of the Bulldogs here.
How big a buzzsaw might Mississippi be running into against Memphis? Memphis a 5-point favorite, 66.5.
Real mystery team in the SEC. And this is a pretty short ride. It's just a little over an hour from Oxford up to Memphis, and there's a lot of Ole Miss people in Memphis, so they'll probably split the crowd at the Liberty Bowl for this one. But the mystery is in Matt Luke is sort of on the hot seat here. They really fell apart late last season, but they have lifted the bowl probation, so they are bowl eligible this year. And he's got new coordinators who are very familiar to Pac-12 fans. Believe it or not, Mike McIntyre, ex-Colorado, is now the defensive coordinator, and Rich Rod is the offensive coordinator. And therein lies the mystery in this game here, because Rodriguez has done some of his best work as a coordinator in the past. And when his offense works, it really kind of distorts a game. And look at the numbers Khalil Tate put up a couple of years ago at Arizona. Now, this is a big change from a year ago at Ole Miss, and they were throwing the ball all over the field with Jordan Tamu, but he's graduated. They're moving to the Rich Rod offense, and they think the redshirt freshman Matt Corral, who's a California product, by the way, can execute what Rich Rod wants to do. Question here is, we know Memphis is potent, and this team scored 42 points per game last year, and Brady White, the quarterback, is back, and Mike Norvell, the head coach, is very creative and might be on his way to a bigger job than this. But that defense last year really coughed it up. And they blew some big leads. And I'm not sure we want to lay the points here. In fact, we called the upset. We're going to stick our neck out with Ole Miss early. 34-30 Rebs, and we're sticking our neck out with this one, but let's see what happens.
All right, another regional rivalry game. South Carolina, North Carolina. South Carolina, 10.5, 11-point favorites. Total on the game, 63.5. The Mac attack for North Carolina, Bruce, and a new defensive coordinator, and I think that bears close watching in this opener.
Oh yeah, it's new. I mean, Bateman comes in from Army, where he got that defense punching above its weight. Now he had an advantage because the Army played a lot of ball control, and the schedule broke right. But they were still pretty physical. They ran. They were flying around the field, and if he can work some of those concepts here into Chapel Hill, Mac really wanted. He had an unlimited budget, really, to go out and hire the guys he wanted, almost unlimited. The coordinators, as he's coming back into the coaching thing for the first time in 6 years, the first time at Chapel Hill since '97. So it is back to the future, but the coordinators of the deal, and Bateman on the defense, and offensively, Phil Longo. We talked about Ole Miss a minute ago. He was running pure spread, air raid at Ole Miss last year, and that's what they're doing here with North Carolina right now. And we'll see one of the new quarterbacks, though, who didn't take a snap last year, is going to have to be the guy detonating it. We have some questions there. I wonder about South Carolina with Deebo Samuel now in the NFL and looking pretty good for the 49ers, how much Jake Bentley's going to miss him. But they do think they've got some weapons. Feaster, the ex-Clemson running back, has transferred in. And Will Muschamp, they've had almost 9 months to stew over that 28-0 loss to Virginia in the bowl game. So I think this is going to be a spot where South Carolina may have the edge. They're playing this one in Charlotte, by the way. 38-24, we're taking the Gamecocks here. Let's make Mac Brown prove it before we start to look at the Tar Heels.
Hey, how about a big ACC game? I mean, we get a lot of these fun non-conference games, but out of the gate, how big is this Virginia Tech game at BC? Virginia Tech 4.5, 58.5.
It is, and a little leery laying the points, but we ended up doing it because I think Virginia Tech should improve this year. I'm not sure I'm ready to say that about BC. We usually don't give a coach a mulligan, but Bud Foster has done so much in his career as the defensive coordinator for the Hokies that we decided he's got almost everybody back. But last year's stop unit really dropped. I mean, they ranked 98th overall, in triple digits in a couple categories. And this is usually a top 10 defense that he has. So I can't believe he lost the plot that quick. So we're kind of banking on Foster with like everybody back from that defense, which did have some injuries last year. To get back to more of its normal self. They used to be able to really stonewall one-dimensional attacks like BC, which really relies on A.J. Dillon, who was playing hurt for much of last year. Got to remember that. And Brown, the quarterback, got a bit better. But Steve Adazio wants to run the football, and the defense should be tough again. If Willis, the quarterback from Virginia Tech, doesn't make mistakes, I think the Hokies go up there and win. But worth noting, I mean, they lost to these guys last year and have failed to cover 2 in a row against BC. 26-19, we took Virginia Tech to win this one.
Yeah, there you go with the low scoring stuff. And listen, the ACC, they're not wasting time. They're diving right in. Talk about a backyard brawl with Mendenhall versus Narduzzi. Virginia 2.5 on the road. Look at this total, Bruce, 46.5. I mean, it's an alley fight.
Yeah, and they didn't get there last year. They landed 23-13. And by the way, that was Pitt winning at Charlottesville last year. And that was a key game to Pitt winning the Coastal last season. But Virginia, I thought, this is the team I got a circle on here this season, maybe an arrow pointed up. I think they recover from that flat effort against Pitt last year. I think this is the team to beat in the Coastal. Bryce Perkins is a dynamic quarterback, dual purpose, runs, throws, ran for almost 1,000 yards last year, passed for nearly 3,000. He does it all. And I'm not sure about this Pitt offense. Now, Pickett, the quarterback, they kind of hit their high water mark in that Virginia game. Down the stretch, they really struggled. They scored 8 points per game in their last 3. They got a new offensive coordinator. Mark Whipple used to be the UMass head coach. But I'm not sure Pat Narduzzi has enough offense here. And I'm going to take Bronco. I'm going to take Perkins. I think this team is a stealth top 15 sort of team and will win the Coastal. But they got to win this game. And I think they will go. 24-17, we're taking Virginia to avenge the loss last year at home.
And we go to the marquee game, and that's Oregon and Auburn. Auburn 3.5, kind of the consensus side here, 55.5. How defining is this game? The hype on Oregon is palpable. We're going to see the young kid Nix. Be fun to watch him, see what he brings to the table from Auburn. But this love for Oregon, their offense, Herbert's a terrific quarterback. But then all of a sudden you get a Pac-12 team going far away from home and maybe get punched in the mouth. Are some questions going to be answered here?
Yes, I think so. And I'm a little perplexed why Oregon, so many people in the media seem to be thinking this is Chip Kelly's Oregon. And that's been a long time since Chip was there. And even Helfrich's the Mariota team, that's several years ago now, that was really good. Those couple teams, that was a very soft 9-4 last year. I know Herbert's good. They were only 5-4 in the Pac-12, and it was a very soft non-conference slate they had last year. I'm not buying. You don't get boat raced at Arizona the way Oregon did, or lose at home to Arizona State, or blow a game against Stanford, or get whipped at Washington State if you're really that good. So I need, all this hype for Oregon has to be based on a projection, not on what they did last year, because it wasn't there. Now you can say the same thing about Auburn. They didn't do much, but I trust Malzahn a little bit more, especially since he's back in his wheelhouse calling plays. They say Bo Nix, they think he's going to be better than Stidham was, and Stidham has played pretty well this summer for the Patriots. We've seen him. So they like Nix, and they thought he and Gatewood, the redshirt freshman, either of them could have led this offense and done what Gus wanted. But that Pac-12 thing you mentioned, this is not a bowl game, but it's a bowl-type game, and the Pac-12 covered only 3 of 19 in postseason play the last 3 years, and then opening week we saw a loss by Arizona at Hawaii, another black eye for the Pac-12. So I think you can make a case for Auburn here, and we did. Gold Sheet pre-release 34-19 Tigers.
All right, we'll wrap it up with 2 late at night. I'm intrigued a little bit. It's a goofy spread, 31.5, 32. New Mexico State against Washington State. Bruce, I think against New Mexico State, I could hit you for 6 passes and 80 yards. New Mexico State can score, and they're going to have to chip in to get this over the total. The side scares the heck out of me. But Washington State had a quarterback battle, and I wonder if that battle actually extends into this game. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if it's that close, I think we could see 2 talented quarterbacks in this game, and the only way you're going to evaluate is if they're throwing the football. I love this game to go over the total.
Yeah, I can see that. And, Leach is going to go with Watson, who is the sophomore, the holdover, to start the game. And there's a lot of thought that Gage Shabrud, the transfer in from Eastern Washington, put up huge numbers in the Big Sky, would probably be the guy. But they're going to start with Watson, but they're going to play Shabrud. I get the feeling like you that Leach is going to be kind of auditioning these guys through into September. You're right, New Mexico State. Yes. 6. I think I could catch 8 passes against this defense from you, Brian. So
I know.
You
got good hands.
Imagine I can still catch. I think, but you could imagine what Leach is going to do. 55-17. I think Washington State's going to be really good again. And again, the question here is defense. They brought in several JUCOs on the New Mexico State side to try and plug the leaks in the dike on the defensive side. But this team was near the bottom in every relevant defensive stat last year. And this is a pretty potent offense. Bad matchup for New Mexico State. So I could see you're over here as well.
All right, Bruce. And finally, the get-out game be a 7:30 Pacific time start, 10:30 on the East Coast. Fresno State, Southern Cal. Southern Cal's 13.5, totals 52.5. I'm intrigued because I think they've got to unleash JT Daniels at Southern Cal. But now Fresno State, maybe to a degree, we're dealing with a bit of transition here. But this program, Bruce, the bottom line is, they just flat out know what they're doing. And, I know that they're hurting on the offensive side of the ball, at least in terms of graduation. But I just like the guidance they get from Tedford here. And I think this is an intriguing game. USC better bring their A game.
Yeah, there's a lot of angles here. And Tedford, like you said, is really the one to notice here for Fresno. I mean, look what he's done since he got there. They've won double digits in bowl games the last 2 years. He inherited a 1-11 team after 2016. So you talk about a quick turnaround and a resurrection job. That Ulysses S. Grant would have been proud of. I mean, this is a tremendous job that Tedford's done. You're right. They've got a lot of graduation of a place on offense, but it's been defense that's been really the hallmark here, enforcing turnovers. Another plus 12 last year. They've been so much better on the stop end the last couple of years, and a lot of that is back. Now, there are so many things going on right there, but the only good thing for Helton, the coach, is that he wasn't involved in the Lori Loughlin scandal at the school. Everything else has kind of gone against him. He's had some problems on his staff with some accusations against Pendergrass, with the legal things going on with recruits and stuff and test taking, and that's not good. Helton's in huge trouble. So is Lynn Swan, the AD. He has gone to a Texas Tech offense this year. Like I was talking to old friend Harvey Hyde. He does the radio talk shows in L.A. for the SC side. He said, "Since when was Texas Tech? Have they ever won big? Why you want to do this?" And Daniels, they thought at the last game of last year against Notre Dame, they went to a shorter passing attack and helped and thought, let's just go all air raid this year and see what happens. I am not sure about Daniels, how he's going to work, and this Fresno defense is going to be tough. We'll see about the offense. Reyna, the quarterback, has been in the program. He hasn't played much, but we'll see about the offense. But we're still going to take Jeff Tedford and company. 26-24 SC, I think they win. I don't think they cover this number at the Coliseum.
Well, we'll see how these teams do right out of the gate, Bruce, but let me tell you something, buddy. As always, you're ready to roll for a brand new season, bringing it right out of the gate. There's a lot to chew on, a lot of great information looking at week one at college football. Brian Blessing, always having a great time when we're joined by Bruce Marshall from the legendary publication, The Gold Sheet.
Let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and The Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.